Good day, everybody. My name is Dana Massey with the Send Your Soul and the Mindful Mama podcast. And my Mindful Soul series continues. Today, I'm interviewing Josephine Hardman. She has a PhD. She's certified in intuitive healing and Akashic Records. She even teaches people how to open the Akashic Records and do healing through that. Welcome, Josephine. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm so excited to get to talk with you.
Absolutely. So I read your bio and that type of childhood is so unique and I feel unheard of.
Yeah.
Tell me about how it was growing up with the type of parents that you had, the environment you flourished in.
Yeah, I agree that it's rare, and I'm so blessed and grateful that that was my experience. And I think it's also kind of miraculous because my parents, they had their own pretty significant traumas growing up. I won't go into their stories in depth because that's for them to tell. But for example, my mom lost two babies before she had me. And my dad was basically abandoned at a boarding school at age 6. They told him they were going on a vacation and then they just left him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like what? So it's not like, they didn't have the perfect experiences growing up themselves. So it's really miraculous, I think, that they really dug deep and they did their own healing. And growing up, they realized, we don't want to be the same way as parents.
It's hard to do. Like they consciously made an effort on both ends.
Exactly. Yes. It's so hard to do that. It takes so much self-awareness. But, they decided we need to break the cycles of intergenerational trauma and patterns that were dysfunctional or unhealthy. And we're going to be different with our child, me. So I really benefited from that. But also they were always really, really drawn to spirituality, spiritual pursuits, self-development, really both of them. And they traveled a lot. So my dad had experience with transcendental meditation and yoga. And then my mom is a psychotherapist and a healer herself. So as I was growing up, they were introducing me to a lot of those practices. So it was just really kind of everyday normal life experience growing up in that home, which again is really unique and special.
Totally. And did you find yourself, because sometimes when we're given all of that, we like want to push some of it away, even as we get older. Did you go through that phase where you're like, okay, that's great, but I want to check all this out?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I did, I would say, experiment or, because I was curious about a lot of those practices and wanted to see how they felt for myself. And like, for example, my dad had a tarot deck in his office desk while I was growing up. So I would just look at the cards and be like, oh, these are so mysterious. What does this mean? But then I did get to a phase, I would say more like in later adolescence of being like, okay, this is your guys' thing. And now I'm gonna go over here and be, so what that meant for me was that I became like a straight A student and went into more of the academic world. And so eventually I went into college and then grad school, got my PhD. So I was going to be a researcher and a scholar and be a professor with tenure. That was really the plan for many years. Did not turn out that way for very conscious reasons. But yeah, I did rebel. I rebelled by being like the perfect student and rational brain and living up in my head and all of those things. So
and then just finding balance. So what started pulling you back to that other side, which I think is so cool that you have the other side of like the balance, like the rational mind mixed with like the subconscious mystical mind, it is pretty neat. So what kind of brought you back to that journey that you
discovered as a child?
Yeah, so I had in my early 20s, or even like on the threshold between 19 and 20, I can't remember exactly, but I started having like mystery physical symptoms
Okay.
of an illness, um, which were kind of paralyzing and really scary at the time. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to go to school. I'm not going to be able to work, because it was really that level of pain and just the symptoms that were interfering with daily life. So I went to a bunch of doctors, got all the tests done, still believed in Western medicine at the
Yeah.
time. I mean, not to say that there are not benefits to Western medicine and that it does help us in a lot of ways. But I think that was for me really my spiritual awakening
Yeah.
in this lifetime, of being really sick and then going to doctors and them just, first of all, telling me you're going to be sick forever. You're going to get worse over time. You need to take these steroids like for the rest of your life to manage the symptoms. That's all we can do. We don't know anything else beyond that. Which,
Disappointing.
yeah, really almost like shattering and really destabilizing, as I was on the cusp of my 20s and thinking, okay, so life is over. I guess life is over at this
And
point.
really, it's like life is just
Um,
starting.
I know, I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, so it was really, really hard. And that's when I sort of had to wake up to this reality of, which for me was, oh, I've placed my authority, I've placed my trust in these men with the white coats, and ultimately there's a lot that they don't know. Um, and that's really scary. And maybe I need to find a way to heal myself, because nobody's else outside of myself is going to be able to do that.
Right.
Like, there's no savior, there's no knight in shining armor that's going to come and make everything better. There's no magic pill.
Right.
So in discovering that, then I had to get serious about, okay, what are the alternative things that I can try? What are the healing modalities? What happens if I meditate every single day? So
Yeah.
I dove back in at that point.
And what was your parents' reaction?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think they were gently nudging me in that, to move in that direction all along. Although, of course, they went to the doctor with me too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So they were
for
supportive.
yeah, to explore all the options, because I don't think that we need to stigmatize, like if we need to get a surgery or take the medication, that those things can be allies on the
Yeah.
healing path. And I mean, I was so grateful that I did have the steroids for a while, because they took some of the pain away. And then sometimes when some of the pain is relieved, then you can really sit and consciously think, okay, how do I want to deal with this? How am I going to approach this moving forward? Because when you're stuck in the pain, it's like there's no way out, and you're just like, your mind is clouded. You can't really
Yeah.
think properly, and you just feel so isolated. So they did help in that way, but my parents were gently nudging and kind of dropping hints, right? Like, there's this other thing, there's this other thing you could try, which I did, and all of that really did help. And ultimately, I was able to, well, first of all, what was really important was making the mindset shift, from, when the doctors said, this is forever, you're going to get worse over time, which now I think of that as a kind of voodoo curse, because it's like they just put that label on you, and then it's so hard to think outside of that box.
Right.
But one day I was sitting there, and I mean, I had been meditating for a while. I was doing alternative healing practices. I found an energy healer. I was doing Reiki on myself, just a lot of different things. Working with crystals, that's really how I started. And then one day I was sitting there, and it was like my mind was unlocked, and I could think, oh, that was just that one person's opinion, that this is going to be forever and it's going to get worse over time. Like, what if there could be a different reality?
Yeah.
What if I could create something different, and that I don't have to believe that? That doesn't have to be my life story. So it really became about, what do I want to create for myself moving forward, and like taking my power back
Which
from
is
that.
such a gift to receive from that experience. I know your parents were big believers in that, like infinite possibilities,
Yeah.
choices. How do you work with your clients? Because it's hard to break mental patterns. It's hard to break these belief systems that have been passed down generation to generation. And it's hard with this season of the pandemic, all of this propaganda going on. Now we
Mm.
have like another layer. How do you work with your clients? Like easy tools for them to just start dismantling it?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And of course there are different layers to that,
Yeah.
but I do think it starts with becoming conscious of what is mine versus what is coming down through the family line or from the culture, or from messaging from school or wherever else, or just external messaging. So what are the beliefs that we've internalized that are not really that are not really ours? And I think we can start to realize that, because sometimes it almost feels like, the way I like to think of it sometimes and explain it to clients is that it's almost like you're taking on these coats that are not yours, or like costumes, and
Yeah.
just layering them one on top of the other. And you're just losing that core essence and that core truth of who you really are. Or, well, you're not really losing it because it's still there, but you're covering it up so much.
Yeah. It
It's
like dims. It's
static.
like the light
Yeah,
gets dimmer and dimmer. Absolutely.
exactly, where you just start losing touch with it. So it's really a process of like slowly removing those coats or costumes or layers that we've
Yeah.
put on. So really a process of unconditioning ourselves, and unlearning the things that are not for our highest good and
Right.
healing, or that are keeping us stuck, limited, or suffering. And so for that, I definitely rely on the Akashic Records as a tool. That is my primary modality. And the records are so good at helping us to take that power back from wherever we've given it away, which could also include internal patterns. So things like perfectionism, people pleasing, approval addiction, all of those things. Or even fear, which I agree with what you were saying, that right now it's like in the collective, there has been a lot
Yeah.
of fear and panic. And it can be difficult, like not to be hooked by that or into that. So just really becoming conscious of what is mine, what is not mine, and then what do I need to clear out so I can return to that core truth.
No, it's so true. And how do you work with people? Okay, like victim mentality. The part of victim mentality is like when I receive my power and my truth, I might not want to step into it because it's a new journey. What's the
Yep.
responsibility? Do I really want this? So how do you work with people that are stuck in the victim mentality and hesitant of what's on the other side?
Yeah, that again, such a great question. And I do, when I experience that with clients, I think it comes through almost as a, I think sometimes, I mean, to be honest, and I see my responsibility as always, so I have to say exactly what I'm seeing that is coming through the records, or, higher source when I'm in the
Yeah.
session. And sometimes that means pushing the client almost like to their edge,
Yeah.
or walking with them to that edge as far as they're willing to go. Um, so if I do see like that they're stuck in that place of victimhood, or maybe not wanting to take ownership of something, then I see my role as really being a mirror in that moment, and kind of reflecting that back, but just as an invitation. And
Yeah.
also reminding them that, if we work through this, and if you do take your power back, that means that you have expanded possibilities of what you can do, what you can create moving forward. And you're going to have more choices, and you're going to get out of suffering. You're going to alleviate your own suffering, which is the most powerful thing we can do, really. So it's more of like opening the door and saying, well, there's this portal here, there's this invitation here. Are you willing to walk through it and see what happens? But then it's really up to them whether
Right.
they want to walk through it or not. Which I can't push or force, but just to take
Yeah.
them to the edge as much as possible.
Yeah, and it's almost showing the clients like there's all these pathways we can take. You can stay in this
Yeah.
frequency. It's absolutely okay. But
Yeah.
maybe what comes with that is this suffering, is this intrusive thoughts,
Yes.
low vibrational belief systems. But then there's all these other possibilities which might require some work,
Yep.
so you get to choose.
Yeah. Oh, and can I say one more thing about
Yes,
that?
yes.
Because something that's really important when I'm working with clients is, figuring out, let's say if we're working on dysfunctional coping mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
Or being in the state of victimhood. Or even when clients have past life contracts or vows that they've made, let's say to play small,
Yeah.
or to never abandon so and so, like some person in their life where it's like a codependent relationship or whatever the situation might be. It's so important for me to help the client figure out what is the secondary gain of the contract or the pattern or being in that place of victimhood. Because to give a concrete example, when I was physically sick, and I did have a contract of self-punishment through illness, which was a past
Okay.
life contract.
Yeah.
But
Right.
anyway, so that was part of figuring out what was really happening. But for me, the secondary gain was that at the time, I was still a people pleaser and a perfectionist, and it was really, really hard for me to say no to other people.
Yeah.
So the secondary gain was, in being sick, in being physically exhausted all the time, I can say no without feeling guilty, without worrying the other person's not going to love me anymore,
Right.
or they're going to reject me or think I'm selfish, which was a really hard thing for me. So I had to figure out, okay, what is the secondary gain in me being physically sick or having the symptoms or having the contract, so that then I could make a decision, right? Like, okay, do I want to take ownership of this and learn how to say no without the
Yeah.
guilt? Or even if I am afraid, like feel the fear and do it anyway, say no. How other people respond is their own business,
Yeah.
not mine. Or do I want to stay sick and using this illness as an excuse to be able to say no? So that was my personal experience.
And that's tough. Like
It
that,
is.
dealing with like the people pleasing, that fear, and the stories. There's like 10 different stories playing out of
I know.
possibilities.
Yes, for sure. I know it is hard. But so that I apply that to my work with clients and figuring out, okay, what have you been getting from this? Because there's a part of you that is really attached to the victim's story or to the contract or to the limitation. And what has that part been getting from it? Or how has it been, quote unquote, protecting you from something worse
I
happening?
like
Which is
that.
sometimes what we think might happen, right? That if we don't have that as a safety blanket anymore, like if I'm not a victim anymore, then what am I? And what am I going to create? How am I going to create it? So it is scary. It's not easy, but it is a choice ultimately.
I like that though, diving into like, okay, what's the secondary gain? Because
Mhm.
that can even give the client awareness because they might not be consciously thinking that they're even gaining anything from it. So it is cool to
Yeah.
dive into that. With the pandemic, such unique circumstances, what
Yes.
are clients coming to you for? I'm sure some of it's the same as before, but is there a common theme that you're seeing?
Yeah. I do think the pandemic, well, collectively, I think it's been a catalyst for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And then individually, I am seeing clients coming in saying, almost like hitting up against all of the ways in which their lives are no longer working, or like if they thought that their lives were working right for many many years, and then for some reason the pandemic is like shining a light on, oh, I am stuck in this job that is not fulfilling me, and my soul really wants me to do this other thing. Or, oh,
Yeah.
I'm staying in this marriage for all these BS reasons. Why am I doing this to myself? This is not the kind of relationship that I want, or the people pleasing with family or whatever the thing might be. But
Yeah.
people always like really hitting up against those limits or those places where their lives have not been serving them, and then wanting to figure out, okay, what do I do with this? How do I change this? How do I transform this?
Yeah.
So stepping more into that place of what is my truth and how do I live it?
It's hard because with the limitations and almost like everyone having to be at home for that period, I know it's changed now. Nobody could run away from their
No,
stuff. And
right.
sometimes the answer is just do the work on yourself. Work on yourself.
Yeah.
See if anything changes from just doing that. So, like, don't point the finger, but it's
Mhm.
like, do the work on yourself. See if something changes. When you get into that growth place anyway, and you're making momentum, you can
Mhm.
make the choice peacefully,
Yeah,
you
that's such a
know?
good point. Yes. And I always say to clients who are struggling with relationship issues, because sometimes the first impulse is, oh, I just need to get out of this relationship and get into the next one, and the next one
Yeah.
will be better. But it's like we're still carrying the suitcases from the old relationship,
Yes.
until we pause. And maybe you don't even have to leave the relationship yet. But if you look internally at, okay, what am I learning here? What is my role in this relationship? What do I bring to it?
Right.
What are the things that I've been tolerating that maybe I don't want to tolerate anymore? How can I communicate that in a loving way? And then maybe it creates the space for that relationship to evolve, and we don't have to like hop into another one. So yeah,
Exactly.
I agree totally that if we need to do the internal introspection first and the
Yeah.
healing work to see where we are. Yeah.
Because the discomfort's coming from inside.
Mhm.
And I think our culture has become to act upon discomfort as, even though it's coming from the inside, okay,
Yeah.
no, it's the job, no, it's this person, no, it's this, or we want comfort right away. So we have all our vices to suppress the
Yes.
discomfort.
Yes. And that, I think for me, that was another big lesson when I was sick, which by the way, they thought it was an autoimmune disorder.
I
Then
was
it,
thinking
yeah,
probably, yeah,
yes. Yeah. And I still have some of the symptoms of it, but I mean, it's lessened by maybe 90%
yeah,
with the healing and spiritual work that I did,
absolutely.
and then some lifestyle changes. So I'm not on any medications now, which is counter to what the doctors said. And I just like to
Yes,
emphasize that to give people hope that there's not just one way, that you're not stuck with that diagnosis. Um, but yeah, that awareness of there is no magic pill that's going to come from outside of me to fix all of these things or to take that emotional discomfort away, because sometimes
absolutely.
it's not a physical thing, but if we have the emotional distress or we're just not happy with ourselves, I think that's when we turn to the substances or the binging Netflix shows or whatever it is,
Yeah,
just to distract ourselves, which is such a human thing to do. And again, I don't want to demonize any of those things, because those coping mechanisms are there for a reason, and they
yes.
sometimes help us survive, which is, so we have to be grateful for them. But then there comes a point where they become obsolete and we just don't need them
Yeah,
anymore.
and keep them in check.
Yes.
Almost like with phones, it's like, okay, understand that they were created to be addictive. So
Right.
when
Yeah.
you're feeling like, oh, I'm checking social media or I'm just checking my email on my phone, understand that you
Yeah.
fell for the bait. We're all
Yeah.
going to fall for the bait. So it's okay to put those like social media detoxes,
Yes.
put the time restraints on these devices or go put it in your room because
Yes.
they're designed, they're working well, you
Oh,
know?
yeah. It's such a trap with the phones and how we're losing like our attention spans and just ability to be present in the now moment without that impulse to check. Sometimes I'll notice I'm sitting and my phone is nowhere near me. But do you ever have that like physical impulse of like, oh, and then you realize it's not there?
Yes.
Like the body itself wants it to be there. It's so weird. And yeah, I could say a lot more about that. But yeah, the detoxes And I think also approaching social media from a perspective of like, how can I use this to create, or how can I be a creator? How can I be the creator here instead of just being the consumer or the
Yes, I
customer?
like that. Yeah.
Because I think that's how they want us to operate on there. But anyway, yeah.
No,
become a creator
I
on
like that. Like
there. Yeah.
when people complain about, oh, my social media is like super negative. Well,
Yeah.
you can make adjustments where when at least you pop
Yes,
on, you're receiving positive
exactly.
messages,
Yes,
you
you can
know?
curate. Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I loved my time with you.
My
And I feel like
pleasure.
people will really be inspired just by this conversation.
Yeah, I really hope so. It was my pleasure. And thanks for all the great questions.
Absolutely.